On March 19, 1945, the aircraft carrier USS Franklin, after enduring a fierce Japanese assault, was a smoldering wreck. The ship's captain, a fierce disciplinarian hated by many of his men, studied the damage, done only miles away from the Japanese mainland. Her flight deck, once bustling with aircraft, lay in ruins, consumed by fires and explosions. The hangar bays were now eerie chambers of charred ruins, and gaping holes marred her sides. Amidst this devastation, the ship's survival seemed an impossible miracle. With the large majority of her crew members gone, it was up to a small group of men to steer their beloved aircraft carrier home, more than 12,000 miles under her own power. From the Caroline Islands, then across the Pacific to Pearl Harbor, and then all the way to the Brooklyn Navy Yard, USS Franklin became the ship that wouldn't sink. On December 7, 1942, the first anniversary of Pearl Harbor, the aircraft carrier USS Franklin was laid down. Named in honor of the American founding father Benjamin Franklin, the ship was constructed to the Essex-class standard, weighing 27,100 tons under standard load and over 800 feet long, and she hosted a complement of 3,448 personnel. By June 1944, following shakedown and training exercises, Franklin was on her way to Eniwetok Atoll, where she was thrust straight into action, performing sorties on the Bonin Islands. Following this, she and her crew supported the assault on the Mariana Islands, a crucial Pacific campaign where U.S. forces significantly diminished Japanese defenses. As the Allies got closer and closer to the mainland, Franklin's aircraft, a blend of fighters, torpedo bombers, and dive bombers, operated over Iwo Jima, Chichijima, and Hahajima, working to neutralize the island's military infrastructure. In July, as the sun blazed over the Pacific, USS Franklin unleashed a fury of airstrikes against Guam's defenses, softening the ground for the impending U.S. assault. Her aircraft then provided fire support to the troops and was crucial in getting a foothold. With Guam under control, she set her sights on the Palau Islands, orchestrating airstrikes and capturing the enemy's hideouts through the eyes of aerial reconnaissance. All this was achieved in the carrier's first month of combat. In August, following maintenance, Franklin resumed operations around the Bonin Islands, with her aircraft targeting airfields, vessels, and enemy planes, and also conducting aerial reconnaissance. By September, after resupplying in Saipan, she supported the Peleliu invasion. After a stop at Manus Island for supplies, Franklin, now the flagship of Task Group 38-4, returned to the Palau area, continuing patrols and launching night fighters. Following Peleliu, USS Franklin made her way to the Philippines, where she helped soften enemy positions during the iconic Battle of Leyte Gulf. During this crucial battle, her deck edge elevator was hit by a bomb, injuring 22 crew members and taking the lives of 3 more. Much of the Philippines was covered with Japanese air bases, a serious threat to any land invasion. While combating this threat, Franklin and the other vessels in her task force often came under heavy attack from kamikaze aircraft. In mid-October 1944, a wounded Japanese Mitsubishi G-4M bomber went down fighting when it turned toward Franklin in a kamikaze attempt. Reacting quickly, it veered into the flight deck, but only skimmed it and caused minimal damage. During the actual invasion of the Philippines, Franklin downed over 10 Japanese planes. By then, the carrier was known affectionately to her crew as Big Ben. Her most significant contribution came on October 24th, when her aircraft attacked the Japanese 1st Raiding Force, helping sink the destroyer Wakaba, then as part of the team that brought down the Yamato-class Musashi, the heaviest and most powerful battleship ever built. A few days later, Franklin and 3 other carriers became the focus of a Japanese kamikaze attack. While most of the aircraft were shot down, a Japanese aircraft slammed through the flight deck and crashed through to the galley deck, taking down 56 men. While Big Ben had already seen a lot of action in only a couple of months, her biggest trial was still to come. On the heels of the attack, Franklin and her men traveled to Ulithi Atoll for some light repairs. At Ulithi, Captain Leslie E. Garys assumed command as the carrier's commanding officer. A World War I veteran and a naval aviator since the 1920s, Gary's was known as a disciplinarian. According to historian Joseph Springer, one of the foremost experts on this ship's exploits, when the new skipper introduced himself to the crew during the change of command ceremony, Gary's chastised his men for the kamikaze attack. Quote, "It was your fault, because you didn't shoot the kamikaze down. You didn't do your duty. You're incompetent, lazy, and careless. Evidently, you don't know your jobs, and I'm going to do my best to shape up this crew." The men, many of whom had lost comrades during the tragic incident, were incensed that their new commanding officer's first words to them were insults. According to some accounts, hundreds of sailors jumped ship in Washington when the carrier made port there for more shipyard repairs. While some left because they believed Big Ben was jinxed following the strike, others escaped Captain Gary's rumored toxicity. On February 2, 1945, back in service, Franklin joined a powerful naval force gathering for an attack on the Japanese homeland. A month later, she was finally off the Japanese coast and ready to strike against Okinawa. After 3 years of war, the Imperial Japanese Navy had become a shadow of its former strength. Naval intelligence estimated that the Japanese were down to 2,000 to 3,000 combat aircraft and even fewer qualified pilots. But the Allies were wrong. The Japanese, realizing that an invasion was inevitable, had secretly amassed nearly 6,000 bombers, fighters, and torpedo bombers, and dispersed them around the countryside, out of sight and out of action, waiting for the perfect moment to strike. On March 19, 1945, a small flight of carrier bombers dashed out to show the overconfident Americans that Japan wasn't ready to give up just yet. In the earliest hours of that morning, USS Franklin and her battle group began attacks on the Japanese home islands to knock out enemy air power. By dawn, she had become the United States aircraft carrier closest to the Japanese mainland during the war, coming within 50 miles of shore. As such, this left her in a dangerous position. While the carrier had been called to battle stations 12 times in only 6 hours between midnight and dawn, by 7 a.m., as the sun slowly rose, all except for the gun crews were allowed to step down. Not even 5 minutes later, aircraft carrier USS Hancock spotted an aircraft approaching the group and quickly broadcast the sighting to the other ships. But it was too late, and the aircraft, likely a Yokosuka D-4Y Judy dive bomber or an Aichi D-3A Val dive bomber, broke through the clouds and made a low-level run on the Franklin, dropping 2 550-pound bombs just before it was shot down by an American aircraft. The first 500-pound armor-piercing bomb struck the tightly packed flight deck, filled with fully armed and fueled strike aircraft. The second went through the flight deck and down into the hangar bay, where even more planes were waiting for an elevator trip up. The resulting conflagration led to more than 8 hours of explosions and fire all over the ship. The explosions severed many of the water lines that were needed for firefighting, and also took the lives of the majority of the damage control team. The sheer heat melted electric wires, knocked out all the ship's communication network, and ruptured fuel lines, causing gasoline to spray onto the fires. More than 800 of the carrier's brave sailors became one with the tortured ship, while hundreds jumped into the sea to cool themselves down, trying to swim in the frigid waters into other vessels who'd come to help the obviously doomed ship. But in the midst of chaos, many of USS Franklin's men would rise to the challenge. Upon discovering 300 of his fellow Americans trapped below deck, Lieutenant Donald A. Gray, a bright engineer who trusted his knowledge of the ship's layout, bravely made his way through dark, debris-filled corridors until he found an escape route and made 3 trips back and forth to the trapped men. According to Gray's Medal of Honor citation, quote, "Despite menacing flames, flooding water, and the ominous threat of sudden additional explosions, on each occasion calmly leading his men through the blanketing pall of smoke until the last one had been saved." As the efforts to battle the fires and sort out the chaos continued, at about 7:30 a.m., Rear Admiral Ralph Davison, the commander of Franklin's task group, told Captain Gary's, quote, "Captain, I think there's no hope. I think you should consider abandoning ship. Those fires seem to be out of control." Gary's nodded, but remained silent and stoic, and Rear Admiral Davison was transferred to the destroyer Miller. 2 hours later, a light cruiser approached the wounded ship, spraying water on the carrier, and began to take in as many Frankliners as possible. Suddenly, the ammunition for Franklin's 5-inch anti-aircraft guns exploded. With more fires than ever, the men still in the engine and steering rooms finally decided to flee the unbearable heat. Only 52 miles from the Japanese shores, USS Franklin, dead in the water with a 13-degree starboard list, had become the most heavily damaged carrier of the war. But while the Japanese had sent more bombers out to finish the job, each was shot down or chased away by other ships. In a couple of hours, only a few hundred uninjured men could still do damage control, rescue trapped shipmates, and counteract the ship's list out of a crew and air group of nearly 4,000 men. Despite the losses, damage, and Rear Admiral Davison's suggestion to abandon the ship, Captain Garys refused to give up. When heavy cruiser Pittsburgh arrived, her men were able to attach a tow line to Franklin. The cruiser then worked the carrier around and headed, with her in tow, toward Ulithi. Just then, the ship's heart started to beat once again. As the sun set on that terrible day, the fires aboard Big Ben had been beaten back enough, and the heat had decreased, to the point that men could finally get through to one of the ship's boilers. By 10 p.m., that boiler was lit and running. Franklin's engines began slowly turning, and to the surprise of many, the tow speed increased to 6 knots. When additional boilers were brought into operation, by noon the next day, the tow line was dropped. Franklin was now progressing under her own power. During the night, the Franklin increased her speed to 18 knots. While fires still burned on the gallery deck and in Captain Garys' cabin, the gyro compasses, search radar, phones, and even some of the carrier's guns were working once again. As the night went on, brave individuals rescued suffocating crew members from smoky, hot compartments. Engineers reignited a boiler, restoring power. Despite enemy pursuit, USS Franklin reached Ulithi, leaving a haunting impression on nearby American ships. Official casualty figures set her losses at 724 men and 265 wounded, second only to that of the battleship USS Arizona, sunk in the 1941 attack on Pearl Harbor. When Big Ben miraculously arrived at Ulithi for emergency repairs, she was ordered to steam for Pearl Harbor, and then to make the 12,000-mile trip back to America's Brooklyn Navy Yard, where Navy planners, mostly in an act of defiance, ordered that she be repaired and returned to duty as soon as possible. Throughout the ship's saga, Captain Garys continued to complain loudly about those crewmen who had jumped ship during the disaster. During this time, he created what he called the 704 Club, a group made up of the men who stayed with him in the ship, and he refused to recommend anyone not in the club for a citation. The Essex-class carrier arrived in Brooklyn on April 28, 1945, where repairs began almost immediately. According to some workers in the Navy Yard, often there were sounds while aboard the carrier without a source. These included men talking and laughing, horsing around like guys do, as their spirits had remained on their beloved Big Ben. The war ended before the repairs were completed, and Franklin was decommissioned in 1947 and scrapped years later. Despite his toxic leadership, Leslie Garys received the Navy Cross, the branch's most important award for martial valor, and he received a promotion to Rear Admiral. In addition to the 2 Medals of Honor that were awarded, 17 other men were awarded the Navy Cross. Other decorations for these brave soldiers included 22 Silver Stars, 115 Bronze Stars, 234 Letters of Commendation, and 1,110 Purple Hearts. In the end, USS Franklin's men became the most decorated crew in United States naval history. Yet the March 19, 1945 attack was far from the Navy's finest hour.